My heart is to see God's people full of passion and the fire of God, hungry for His presence on a daily basis, full of His power and having a positive impact on the world and those around them, living a life of freedom and victory. This is Running with Fire.
The Church of Jesus Christ began with a bunch of frightened disciples locked inside 4 walls. Does that sound familiar? Because much of the church today in the West is still frightened and locked inside the 4 walls, while those who need our message, our love, and our gospel of salvation are outside the 4 walls of the church. You see, friends, the only way we're going to get this job done is if we mobilize the entire church. We all do our bit. The whole job is going to get done. Friends, I'm here to tell you today that we're not living in normal times. Masses all around us remain unsaved and lost. This is the emergency of all emergencies. You need to change your lifestyle and your behavior. And you need to respond more, I'm talking to myself, to the state of emergency and to do everything within your power and the strength that God gives you to rescue those who are without hope and without Christ. God is calling us to mobilize ourselves and every church across this nation to do all that they can to rescue the perishing, to reach those who don't know Christ, to make disciples and to see the Church of Jesus Christ grow and expand across New Zealand and across the globe. I've just enjoyed the best holidays I've ever had in my entire life. In my short 25, 30 years. It's the best of them. And there was the usual stuff, relaxing, reading, watching a bit of sport now and then, plenty of golf, grandkids, and of course, lots of time at the beach to show off my washboard abs. They are a sight. I tell you, my wife says they are a sight. She said, keep them hidden. Only for special eyes to see. So you might think, what made it so fantastic? Well, this is what happened. Is very early on in my holiday, the Holy Spirit just gave me a greater hunger for God. Just drew me to Himself. And so I was able to spend significant amounts of time just praying, seeking God and in His Word. And telling you, if you want a really good holiday, that sets you up. It really does. And as a result of that, God gave me some amazing revelations of how we should actually live our Christian life and how to actually serve God. And I remember thinking, God, why didn't you tell me this 30 years ago? Why now? Because I'm more free today than I was previous to this, because the truth sets you free. Yeah, right. It's an amazing thing. The truth actually, so I've been liberated by that. But even more than that is, as I stand before you today, I can honestly say I'm closer to God today than when you last saw me. Getting closer to God is the ultimate achievement in life. It is the mountaintop. It is Everest. Nothing can beat it. You know, if someone came up to me, in all honesty, and said, "Tak, here you go. Here is $100 million. You can either have that, or you can get a little bit closer to God." 100 million, a little bit closer to God. Friends, I'm telling you, in all honesty, I would not even have to think. Give me a step closer to God. Because money's going to come and go, but your relationship with God endures forever. In all eternity. And so my prayer for all of us is that this year, by the end of this year, you'll be much closer to God than you are today. John 20, verse 19, the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood in the midst and said to them, "Peace be with you." After the death of Jesus, the disciples are full of fear. And they're locked in this second floor room, terrified. All their statements of bravado and Jesus will never forsake you and we'll die with you and Jesus, you can depend on us, gone. Gone. And they're now locked inside the four walls of this room, terrified. The Church of Jesus Christ began with a bunch of frightened disciples locked inside four walls. Does that sound familiar? Because much of the church today in the West is still frightened and locked inside the four walls. While those who need our message, our love, and our gospel of salvation are outside the four walls of the church. Now, to be fair, as Church Unlimited, and I know many other churches, we've made good progress. We worked out that over the course of last year, we had about 800 people across campuses gave their lives to Christ, and many were added to the church. So well done. Come on, give yourselves a hand. It's been great. We've made progress. But we need to make more progress because most of our communities are still totally untouched with the gospel and the message of salvation. What is it going to take to get me and you more outside the four walls and more fervent and passionate about making Christ known? Well, I'll tell you what's not going to do it. Condemnation, heavy-handed messages. That's not going to do it. It won't mobilize anybody. I've learned that. I tried that for years. It doesn't work. What it's going to take is what it took the early church disciples. What happened? They had an encounter with the Holy Spirit. They met with God. That's our prayer for New Zealand. People are going to meet with God and give them courage and boldness to get outside the four walls and do what they can, do their part in reaching a lost world. You see, friends, the only way we're going to get this job done is if we mobilize the entire church. If we all do our bit, the whole job is going to get done. And we need a fresh touch. So my prayer is that in the coming days, today and weeks to come, that God will touch my heart, your heart afresh, and somehow shift something within us that just gives us a greater heart for lost people. Because that's the mission of the church. What God has actually called us to do. So in many ways, I'm really preaching to myself this morning because God has challenged me. And if something resonates in your heart, well, take it on board. Otherwise, just say, God, keep dealing with him. The Great Commission is not an option to be considered. It is a command to be obeyed, the words of the great Hudson Taylor, one of the finest missionaries of all time. And this is why we do New Zealand and beyond. It is an obedience to the command of Jesus and the Great Commission. His final instructions to his disciples, go into all the world, preach the gospel. And so we're trying to mobilize the Church of New Zealand to do exactly that. This message, I believe, is going to explain to you why you have so many struggles in your life. Why so many things go wrong in your life. Why there's sickness and relationship breakdowns and marriage problems. This message will actually explain why this is all happening. And hopefully it will give you some purpose in your life as well. And it will also explain why the world is in such turmoil on every front and in virtue and in every nation. So listen carefully, please. Our problems all began in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 6. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, pleasant to the eye, she took of its fruit and ate. She gave to her husband with her, and he ate. The impact of the fall of man, the sin of man, has been nothing short of catastrophic. No other event in world history has resulted in such disaster, trouble, and turmoil. So our world, designed to be the Garden of Eden, literally heaven upon earth, is now full of wars. The death of millions, famines, disease, earthquakes, broken families, poverty, suicide, alcohol, drug abuse, domestic violence, fear, depression, mental health, and 1,000 other miseries that go with it that we see daily on the television and read in the news. This phrase has been in my spirit for the last 5 or 6 weeks, that the earth is convulsing under the weight of sin. The earth is literally convulsing and spewing out, if you like, under the weight of sin. And that weight is getting stronger and stronger, and the disasters are getting greater and greater. Man is made in the image of God, and with his brilliance, he's coming up with all kinds of inventions and cures and remedies and rescues to save this planet that is in free fall. But with no success, friends. Do you know why no success? They're not dealing with the root issue, which is sin and the fall of man. They'll try for the endless days. They've written all these books on relationships and how to do relationships well. And what's the result? Worst relationships ever in the history of the world. It doesn't work. It's not dealing with the issue of the fall of man. You know, we as Christians, we're the only ones that understand why the world is in such a mess. It's all been prophesied and spoken of in the Bible. And it's going to get worse, folks. It's not going to get better. I can't imagine being a non-Christian and looking at this world and all the disasters and turmoils and betrayals and abuses and violences and rapes and murder and all the rest, and looked on and I'd think, what on earth is going on? I reckon I'd probably go on drugs. Get on the booze, because I don't think I could handle it if it made no sense. This is hell on earth. Are you hearing me? It's the fall of man. Catastrophic consequences. And we alone have the answer. Until Jesus returns, the inhabitants of earth live in a state of extraordinary emergency. And the stakes could not be higher. Thousands fall headlong into a lost eternity every day. And what's more, the earth and creation have felt the effects of the fall of man and of sin. Listen to these verses. They surprise you. Romans 8, 21, 22. Because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into glorious liberty. For we know the whole of creation groans and labors with birth pangs until now. So all of creation, the trees and the fields and everything out there is struggling under the weight of sin. Sin has affected the planet. So we have these disasters. We have these floods. We have these tsunamis. We have the volcanic eruptions. We have floods. We have fires. We have global warming. Got to deal with the root. New Zealand's considered a very high risk for natural disasters. Very high risk on any list. Imagine, God forbid, if a volcanic eruption or a massive flood or earthquake hit your city or hit Auckland City, and people all around you are struggling for survival, and many are losing their lives. And you look out your window and you see this catastrophic disaster. I've got a question for you and a question for me. What would you do? As you looked out, I want you to tell your neighbor for 30 seconds what you would do. Hopefully you're not going to say nothing. Turn and roll over and go back to sleep. I just sit on my lazy boy and watch some golf. What would you do, friends? I'm telling you, not one able-bodied person would refuse to do all they could to save as many as possible. No one would feel they could stand by and do nothing, because this is the accepted code by which society functions. You see it in any disaster that takes place. Everyone possible who can do something gets on board with it. They do what they can. The emergency for some becomes an emergency for all. No one talks of normal times until the emergency is over. Friends, I'm here to tell you today that we're not living in normal times. Masses all around us remain unsaved and lost. This is the emergency of all emergencies, because people who are not reached with the gospel suffer a fate far worse than death. If death was the end, it wouldn't matter that much. But friends, death is not the end. You either go to heaven or hell. There's no in between. There's no second chance. This is an emergency. As people go to a crisis of eternity, and only Christians, we're the only ones who have the answer. We're the only ones who can rescue the perishing. No one else can do this, friends. The politicians, the businessmen, the school teachers, the millionaires, the billionaires, the trillionaires, they can't do it. Only us, only we have the answer. That's why Jesus said, go, go, go to all the world, from your neighbor to the ends of the earth. God has been saying to me and saying, Tak, you can no longer live as things were normal. Nothing is normal. Tak, you're no longer to continue on as if no emergency exists. You need to change your lifestyle and your behavior. And you need to respond more, I'm talking to myself, to the state of emergency. And Tak, do everything within your power and the strength that God gives you to rescue those who are without hope and without Christ. This is an emergency. And the time is short and it's running out, and Jesus is going to come back. This emergency will continue until sin is put down and Jesus reigns and rules forever in a restored world and his eternal kingdom, and trusting we will reign and rule with him. These are not normal times. There's nothing normal about today, friends. I cannot just do little. I must give it my all by God's grace. The church that does not evangelize will fossilize. Can I just add that the Christian who does not evangelize will also fossilize? We can no longer live as though everything's normal and okay. This is an emergency. And God is depending on us as church to do everything we can to make his love known across the globe. Matthew 27:65 said, you have a guard of soldiers. Go and make it as secure as you can. When Jesus was dead and buried, they had this big stone rolled against the tomb, and they asked Pilate, the Pharisees asked Pilate for permission to seal the stone and put a guard around the tomb to make sure Jesus didn't get out. They gave it their best shot to keep Jesus buried and the gospel message silenced forever. It was hopeless then, and it's still hopeless today. For 20 centuries, the world has done everything it can to rid itself of Jesus, but they can't bury him. They can't keep him down. They can't rid the world of him. They can't silence him. No power on earth can stop the spread of the gospel of Jesus Christ across the globe. It can cross every barrier. It does not need a visa to enter a country. Through you and me and the church of Jesus Christ, he will be preached in all the world, and then the end will come, and multitudes that no man can number will be saved. Revelation 3:9-10, I look and behold a great multitude which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, saying with a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. We will get the job done. The power behind us is greater than the task ahead of us. The task may seem great, it may seem insurmountable, it may seem impossible, but we believe there is a greater power behind us that will help us to fulfill the mission of God, to reach a lost and a broken world with the good news of Jesus Christ. What will be my response, your response to the state of emergency? Firstly, can I say, get started. Do something, do anything, do something this week. Because the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Do something. Pray for a lost person. Be kind to a neighbor. Be kind to someone at work who doesn't know Christ. You know what? Bake a cake. Invite someone to church. Do something. Tell the person next to you, do something. Come on, a bit louder than that. Yell it at them. Do something. Now tell the person on the other side. Second go. Have another go. Do something. Do something. You know, if we all do something, we'll get the job done. See, the key to all this is mobilizing the whole church. That's the key. Get everybody going. Secondly, God wants us to have sinner friends. Our phone list should include unsaved people. Go home and count how many unsaved people on your phone list, then make a decision to add a few next week. Just a thought. Luke 15, verse 1, tax collectors and sinners drew near to him to hear him. What? They're not drawing near to me to hear me. Most people were not running from Jesus, they were running to him. They're running to him. Why? One word, love. He loved them. He didn't see sinners as enemies. He saw them as friends. We see them as enemies, don't we? Lord, protect me. No. He saw them as friends. That's why they wanted to listen to him. That's how he could influence them. It's interesting. He never condemned them. Have you ever noticed that lost people never listen to those who condemn them? They just won't. It's bad enough to be arrested illegally, beaten illegally, crucified illegally. But it seemed like they wanted to do the ultimate humiliation. So they thought, Son of God, you think you're the Son of God? We're going to crucify you between two sinners, two criminals, two robbers for the ultimate humiliation. But as always, the devil gets it wrong. No matter what he tries, it just backfires on him. I'll show you why. Matthew 27:38, two robbers were crucified with him, one on the right side and one another on the left. Isaiah 53, verse 12, he was numbered with the transgressors. Throughout Jesus' whole life, he was among sinners. Interesting, isn't it? He was born for sinners. He came to save sinners. And I thought about this, being crucified between two sinners, think about this, is the ultimate picture of the mission of Jesus. Because even on the cross, he's given two lost people access to the message of salvation. See, the devil overstepped the mark because one of them ended up getting saved. Now, Jesus could have been, crucified between two of the apostles, and it would have looked like, the three heroes of the faith. That would have been good for the apostles, they would have been comforted, but how much more powerful between two sinners. See, throughout his whole life, Jesus was among sinners. We live in a state of emergency, the highest possible stakes of heaven and hell. And the challenge for you and me is to be found among sinners, as salt, as light, giving them guidance and direction, not being influenced by them, but influencing them, shining in a dark place, not becoming worldly because we're mixing with them. Some Christians begin to mix with the worldly people and they become worldly. So instead of influencing the non-Christians influence them. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about salt and light and being among the lost so that you know that your salvation is strong and your faith and your walk with God is strong. You can be among sinners and win them for Jesus. Story in the paper about a bad girl gone good. It's a great story. You may have heard it before. It's about Heather. She earned $2,000 a night as a stripper. Then she got saved, gave up earning $2,000 a night and joined a church staff on slightly less pay. Just slightly less. But it was worth it. So what did she do? She'd have a stand at these expos and she'd reach out to prostitutes, strippers, and people in porn. She said her message was this: I wanted them to know they're loved. And the church is waiting for them to come through the doors where they'll be accepted and loved upon. This was Heather's experience. She ended up going to a church. And in that church, she was loved. She was accepted. It was a church that welcomed sinners. We welcome sinners. That's our whole purpose. That's why we exist, friends. They're not our enemies. They're our friends. Welcome them in. Invite them in. And when they come, just love on them. Here's another thought. in your response to the state of emergency, because we do need to respond. Know your testimony. And to be able to tell it in 60 seconds, not 60 minutes, they will fall asleep. Not 6 minutes, they will have a snooze. 60 seconds. Write it out. I promise you, if you write it out, God will give you opportunity to share it. Got to memorize it as well and know it as well. 60 seconds. Write it down. You might say, well, what do I write in this? How about writing the most significant thing God has done in your life? Here's a question. Is there anyone here where you could say, God's done something significant in my life? Give me a wave. Write it down. Write it down. Do you know people love a feel-good story? And I'll tell you what they really love, a life that's been changed. Because I'm telling you, out there, they're all struggling. They might have a smile on their face, friends, but their hearts are sinking rapidly, because that's the world in which we live. A feel-good story. Just start telling when God gives opportunity, just tell them the story about it. And whatever you do, don't get into an argument. Don't fight with them, because that will just shut the door. That's what I used to do in my early days. I remember being out in the car park once. There's 4 guys fluffing around. I think they were drinking and doing stuff. And I started to tell them about Jesus Christ. And they started to laugh at me. And I said, you guys, you need to repent. Get your life right with God, or you're going to burn in hell. Do you know what they did? They just kept on laughing. I walked away and I thought, that didn't work. Zeal without knowledge. Find out, write it down, and let God give you an opportunity to share it, which He surely will. One more thing. Part of New Zealand's, or Church Unlimited's, response to the state of emergency is New Zealand and beyond. You see, New Zealand and beyond, friends, can I just remind you, which you already know, it's not about come to a great conference with fantastic speakers and worship and happy clappy and we all have a wonderful time. No, that's not New Zealand Beyond, friends. New Zealand Beyond is a response to a state of emergency, where God is calling us to mobilize ourselves and every church across this nation to do all that they can to rescue the perishing, to reach those who don't know Christ, to make disciples and to see the Church of Jesus Christ grow and expand across New Zealand and across the globe. That's a simple response that you can make to this state of emergency. We will get the job done.
Thanks for watching Running with Fire with Bhana from Church Unlimited. Church Unlimited meets in a number of locations across New Zealand and overseas. We would love to have you as our guest.